Unknown caller.
Welcome everyone to this week's edition of Impactful Teamwork, and I'm Julia Felton, and today I am joined by a guest. We have Craig Bromage, and Craig is the head of infrastructure and platforms at the National Highway and is a massive advocate of leadership and has his own leadership platform called the Everyday Leader. So Craig, welcome to Impactful Teamwork. We are really happy to have you here today.
Hi Julia, thanks for having me.
It's really great to have you here. And Craig, you and I connected on LinkedIn because of some really insightful comments you wrote on something that I posted. And I really loved the perspectives you had on leadership. Perhaps before we delve into that, I'd love to talk a little bit about your history, because I understand that you were originally in the RAF. So
Yep.
I'm really curious about what parallels from leadership, both good and bad, you've seen while you're in the military that apply in the real world and in your role on the front line today.
Yeah, so I don't think I'm unique in a number of people leaving the forces and finding themselves in civvy street and taking up leadership roles. I think I did the best part of 9 years in the RAF as electronics engineer in air defence radar, so
Wow.
big green tactical radars, 400-500 mile sort of detection areas. I've been out now, say, 25 years, and technology's moved on a lot. In fact, some of that technology is now in the museum, which makes you really old.
I know, it makes us feel old, right?
But yeah, I think leadership in the military has moved on a lot, but I still see people come out and write about their experiences, which aren't too dissimilar to mine. I think a lot of what I saw was how not to do it. You would find that, particularly my trade, promotion was based on training courses. So you would go on a technical training course, you'd come out of that and you'd be promoted. If there weren't any of those training courses available, you never got the chance to be promoted. So people hung around for a long time. And then when you were promoted and you got out of a certain rank, corporal onwards, a lot of that was then just time in. And a lot of those people did their time in, and as they got promoted, had more manpower under them, and frankly didn't have the skill set to go with it. Experienced a lot of really bad managers or leaders with no skill whatsoever, but they got away with it because there was no HR. You did as you were told, whether you liked it or not, and that was never course corrected. And I think when you're in civvy street, you've got HR, certain attitudes aren't tolerated, and you do have to behave differently. And I took a lot of how not to do it from the RAF with me, and was able to implement what I thought was better.
Yeah.
And also, I've been fortunate enough to have formal leadership training in civvy street through various organisations as I've been promoted along the way, and that informs you as well. And none of that was available in the Air Force. There was no Myers-Briggs, there was no personality testing, there was no, there's all that kind of psychometric stuff. It just wasn't available. You just get, and that was that, and work it out for yourself. Yeah,
It is still a challenge, though. I think I totally hear what you're saying. I think still in the civvy world or corporate world today, we still both see promotions happening based on longevity, even though some of us know, we know, the smarter of us, should I say, or the more, I hate the word enlightened, or self-aware, would say that's not a great strategy. I've still seen it though happening in a lot of companies, and where particularly the technical expert, somebody who's maybe a great salesperson, gets promoted to be the director of sales. And of course, those two roles are actually completely different. And all of a sudden somebody struggles and is no longer the golden employee that they were before, because they're doing some completely different role that's got a completely different skill set, even though it's in the same vertical.
Yeah. So I went through that myself. Back in the early 2000s, I was T4 workstation server sort of engineer. I did a bit of Windows 2000 and moved into a bit of transactional SQL, if anyone knows, if people are still doing that. But I used to swing in and out of being in a technical role or being in a management role, and swung back and forth. I couldn't make my mind up what I wanted to do. And in the end, I stuck in the management role and stayed there. partly because I didn't want to keep going back through all the technical recertifications that Microsoft were coming out with, PSEs. But I really wish the industry would find a way of recognizing really good engineers, allowing them to be promoted without attaching it to management capability, because that's not who they are. I don't know if you've come across a Simon Sinek piece. He has a really good way of describing it. He would say, I'm going to struggle now, I've mentioned it. He would say, everyone wants to be the CEO, but because they see that as the sort of like number one on the pedestal. And actually, they shouldn't necessarily do that. They should see themselves as a CFO or a CIO. They're just like 1A, and the CEO is 1B, and the CFO is 1E or something like that. They're all top of their verticals. You don't need to move into someone else's swim lane because that's not your specialism. I think he does a better job of describing it than I do, but that's essentially the premise.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree. And I think that's where I've seen so many failures in leadership in organizations, is these people promoted into, and that's my bugbear about this promotion, is because the only way people can get more salary is when they get promoted up into leadership. But actually, you can be a brilliant engineer, and we need brilliant engineers. And why should they not be able to get the same recompense as the leader, just because their expertise is in a technical skill rather than in leading people and teams, I guess.
But I think also once that's happened, those people, they very often can't leave the technical world behind. So because they're an engineer, they loved it. But the reality is they then say 40-hour week, they then got, say, 20 hours for leadership, management stuff, and all the trap that comes with all the strategy sessions and all that nonsense. And then 20 hours for maybe tinkering under the bonnet of various systems. They're getting left, technically, that engineering wise, they're getting left behind. That, I mean, I understand the Lego brick concepts, but I'm no longer at that end of the slide rule of technical, thank goodness. And I'm happy to be there, but I lean on subject matter experts. I know I'm not the most technical person in the room, and I ask the architects and the SMEs for that input. But so many people still want to dabble because they still think they're the expert. They haven't realized that technical world moves on at incredible pace. And actually, they're now being left behind because they're trying to do the leadership stuff, and they're doing neither well. And I really wish they'd realized that, but
and I think it's because I see this a lot in organizations, particularly with people just getting promoted into leadership and management roles. And I think it's because there's some kind of safety in going back to the bit, it's like you want to keep dropping back into your comfort zone because, I had this role previously before I was promoted, so I know exactly what's going on there. And then, of course, you start causing this big bottleneck in the organization because you start getting in the way.
You think you know best because you were the expert, but that was at the technical side, not at the leadership side. And leadership, I have a phrase where we can either do it to people or with people, and with people takes longer, but it's more enduring change. I find that a lot of people who've moved into leadership from a technical background, not everyone, but a lot, to do it too, because they're still carrying this idea that technically they're still better because they've got the certification or the qualification, that they've attained a certain engineering level, therefore they can prescribe. And that's not how leadership works in my mind anyway.
So let's just talk a little bit about your philosophy then about leadership. Can you sum it up in a few sentences about what's your philosophy around leadership?
The everyday leader sums it up, to be perfectly honest. That's a nice segue. So I had an epiphany a while ago that a lot of people strive to become, they start at the service desk, and if it's IT, for example, and they want to be CIO or they want to be this, and that's their trajectory through their career. And a lot of it is, as we've already spoken about, is salary based and all of that. But sometimes it's because they want to be in a leadership role. And actually, if you're a director or a chief of something or other, you're in a leadership role, but you've got so much other stuff going on. about running a business that's not necessarily leadership.
Yeah.
It's the more management side of things. And actually, so many more people their lives would be enriched if they realized they're a leader in what they do every day. And that could be, I think you might have read an article where I talked about my 2 Cocker Spaniels, you know, that and I think ties in with your horse stuff. It's where they don't care what your job title is. They just want you to rock up in an authentic manner.
Yep.
And I've been a treasurer at a local scouts group when my children were younger and tried to manage that and different voices, and I felt I didn't have any authority in those areas, so you tread more carefully. And at the time I didn't have the skill set to have those conversations, so you fumble through it. But also when you've got a family with children and partners, even older parents and uncles and siblings, it's like in fact I remember once I was driving the car and I was told, stop talking to your mother like you're managing her. And I remember once as well, I was told, I wish you could manage the children as well as you manage your team. But a little while ago, all that sort of came together for me. We've all got bits of leadership in what we do. We can all take charge of a community conversation and say, okay, how do we come together to agree this? Or there's things we're not saying at home around the dining room table that we ought to say. There's bugbears that escalate up. How do we have that honest conversation? How do we give really good feedback and make it land? So there's so much opportunity in everyday life to be a leader in what you do, and then step away from it again, and then go into another environment at another time. And so many people have got so many really good ideas or could change the world if they just thought they had the right to have a voice. And they do have a right to have a voice, but it's how you go about delivering that message. And that's what I try to write about. I try to point these things out to say, actually, if you make a psychologically safe environment for people, they will be more honest. If they're more honest, you'll understand more as a leader, they'll understand more, and you'll all move forward better. There's a lot of structure to it that help that, but everybody can be a leader in their own sphere of influence.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. At a basic level, we're all leaders of our own lives, right? in terms of, well, how do we want to show up? What do we want to do? But I think it's a really interesting point you make about permission, because I think so many people, when you're a kid and we're growing up and you start putting up your hand or you're shouting out and they're like, no, Johnny, don't talk now. And I think as a culture, we've been really bad at dumbing people down. And so you get to be a business leader, business owner, and we want people to step up and be visible, which all our programming when we were a kid was don't speak up and don't say things.
I want to tell you a really funny anecdote. Please. And I really love this. And it's about my daughter. She's just graduated from university. She's just done linguistics and English language, done really well. And she's had to work at it. She's a model of consistently working at it over a period of time to achieve. Things didn't come that easy. And so she was in primary school and she was coming home, and there was a certain teacher that would set homework, and my daughter would go off and do the homework, think she'd done the homework really well, and then go back to school and deliver the homework. And the homework either wasn't marked or wasn't given the right amount of attention. She'd get upset about it, or she'd do the homework and the teacher said, that's not what I asked for. And my daughter was adamant, it was what you asked for. Yeah. You've just changed the goalpost. I think most of us are familiar with SMART objectives: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, timely. So I sat down with my daughter, and over a course of a week, we smarted a load of everyday stuff. And I said, when you go back into this lesson with Miss, and I won't say the name, I said, how are you going to smart the homework? And so we went through it and we modeled it, and it was we made it a game. It sounds we made it a game. Anyway, at that time I was working away midweek, and Mondays and Fridays I was at home and I'd go and do the school run. So I think it was a Friday afternoon. I went to do the school run and I got called across the playground by the head teacher. And Mr. Bromage, can I have a word? And I was like, oh God, here we go. What's happening? And she said, your daughter. Oh, right, okay, what? I said, what if you taught her? Because she's managing one of my teachers. So I had to explain SMART, and she's yeah. So, and I, I don't know what that tells you, but I really love it. And I just think actually she had a really simple tool to manage up that way. And that got around. And that was like, wow, that's different. I don't think that should have happened. I think the teachers should have been better at managing it. Maybe the kids should have been given these lessons so that they understand the ask better. But I love that. And I think it's a good example of letting her lead.
Yeah, and such an important, I know it's a used model quite a lot, obviously the SMART model, but so important because it gives everyone clarity, right, about what's going on. And I think that that's the thing that I really like about that model. And obviously, if your daughter understood the homework in a smart way, she knows what she has to do. And then there's no ambiguity when she goes back and the teacher says you haven't done it, because everyone's clear on what's going on. And yet so many times in organizations, we see this miscommunication going on where the leader thinks they've told somebody what to do and the other person said something completely different. And then we wonder why projects go awry and things don't go to plan.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is taking the time to think about your own behaviors, how you show up and what you're asking for. I recently asked for a piece of work and it didn't come back as I expected. And I had to go back again. It didn't come back again as I expected. And I looked at the original ask, and actually the ask along with the example were two different things. So I put my hands up and I said, actually, it's my bad. The example didn't align with the ask, and this is why we're not getting the response. But I don't think people take the time to look back. And I like to say that we're paid for outcomes, not outputs. I want the right whatever at the end of the sequence. I don't need 100 emails, 50 Word documents, and a PowerPoint, unless that's the output, but unless that's the outcome required. But yeah, and anyone in my team will tell you that they've got full permission just to go and take the dogs for a walk or go for a walk in the middle of the day if they need to, because they come back having got clarity. And that's such a delivery accelerator, just taking time away, get out in nature, have a walk, think about things or not think about things, and then come back. I think we get tied up in constantly having to deliver, constantly having to be online, constantly having to be at our desk. And that doesn't allow us time to think and reflect. And I think that's like sleeping. Everyone knows you've got to sleep 8 hours a day if you want to be healthy. I think you've got to reflect if you want to be a good leader.
Yeah. No, I love that. And you and I were talking before we came on air about the importance of that kind of reflecting on work and experiences. And we were talking about particularly about AI, weren't we? And
yes.
How one of the challenges in the workplace nowadays can be that team members are producing AI. And I've had a situation with my own virtual assistant where I've asked for something and I've just been delivered something that's it's pretty obvious. Let's say she hasn't reviewed it. It's just AI's churned it out and I've been given that and here you go. And I'm like, no, there's something else that needs to happen. So I'm just curious in your experiences, what are you finding in the workplace right now and how people are adopting AI and the other clients and people you talk to and your colleagues about how people are adopting AI and what are some of the pitfalls that we're seeing happening out there?
So I see lots of organizations adopting AI faster than others, and I don't think my organization is as fast as it could be, but that's not stopping the use of AI. You might not have a full fat Copilot license in your organization, but your spouse might. And I think sometimes those organizations that aren't adopting it, those team members are getting left behind because they don't know how to use it. They don't know what the button at the top of the screen does. And that's not good. And then you've got to play even more catch up when you do eventually catch up. There's a bigger gap because it's moving so fast. For me, though, people are using it. They're doing it in their own systems if corporate systems don't allow that. And they're generating content. But I'm really clear that we don't commit. There's got to be a human at the end of that, and that can do a huge amount of heavy lifting for somebody, or it can do some critical analysis, or it can just move the project along a lot and can save days and days of, in my case, taxpayers' money, which allows us to do more things or spend more time making things better.
Mm.
But at the moment, in my area, there's no commit. There's a human at the end of the decision making, but I just see different levels of output. There's at one end of the scale, I think there's quite sloppy output. There's fingerprints all over it with AI and AI isms. And my use of AI has got to a point now where I think we were saying before we came on air that I think I can spot a co-pilot image at 100 paces.
Right.
I'm thinking my eyes in with that. And that's not necessarily a problem, but I'm just saying that's where I'm seeing it. And then there's other text that gets generated and you think that's that engine, that's something else, or I don't recognize that at all. So I've certainly got people around me who inhabit both ends of the spectrum, where their prompting is a whole lot better, their project context, how they're training it is a whole lot better than others. And but we at the moment we must sanity check it. It does bother me about is it going to kill human creativity? I don't know. Or does it augment it? I haven't quite reflected on that long enough to have made a decision.
Yeah, I'm from the proponent that I think that actually the concept of AI is great because it can save us so much time, energy, and money. Well, it should be able to take a lot of the grunge jobs away. There's a stat I shared on one of the podcasts recently that CEOs were thinking % of jobs were going to be gone because of AI. I don't know that the jobs are gone. I think the jobs are just reshaped, right? Because actually what we need to do is see AI as another team member, co-conspirer with us, our co-facilitator, our co-leader in whatever we're creating. But I think what I am seeing is too many people abdicating and they're just putting some sloppy text into a prompt, accepting the output without doing that critical thinking and examining it and going, is that really right? Or how can we make that better? And I get it. People are busy and it's like something's better than nothing. But then sometimes, I don't know about you, but I can get so overwhelmed that I've got so many different iterations from my AI on a topic. Then I'm like, my thinking has just blown my mind that I've got too many alternatives to use.
Yeah, I do. I totally agree with you. If I ask for a critical analysis on something and I feed it that data, sometimes it's like, well, I never thought about that. Oh, I never thought about that. I never thought about that. It's like, now I've got 3 more rabbit warrens to go down tonight before I can go to bed than the 4 I already had previously. Sometimes ignorance is bliss. Just one thing on the AI about jobs and things. I was talking to someone over the weekend who's ex-Navy and extremely experienced in underwater vehicles. And the Royal Navy's been putting autonomous AI in, and they're now running a business. It's a startup around supporting organizations with that technology. And one of the use cases I never even thought about, and I think this is an example of where those who say AI are going to be taking jobs, okay, it might take a job that's, say, doing a lot of grunt work for document production or data analysis, but it does open up other. So this use case that this person was talking about with me was autonomous AI in underwater drones, where they can sit at the bottom of a body of water, a river or something between that and the ocean or wherever else, as a sleeping guard dog. So periodically they will sense something's changed, they will wake up, they'll go and have a hunt around. If there's nothing to see, they'll just send a report in and then go back to sleep again. And that they could be there in given the battery power for months and get swapped out. I thought that's really interesting that those use cases, and there must be more and more if we think about it. So I think it'll be how we deploy it, and some of those autonomous situations I think will be really interesting in the future, particularly in inhospitable areas that we want to monitor.
Yeah. No, I love that. Sitting, because you couldn't have somebody sitting at the bottom, even with the best oxygen tanks, right? You've got to come up pretty regularly for air, right? You can just put a drone down there for a long period of time and just gives you a different perspective on what's going on. So
and what if it reduces the submarine fleet because you haven't got to have a submarine sitting there? What can you do with that money instead? So I think there's a lot of potential for it.
No, I think it's fascinating, and we started this episode with thinking of in the last 20 years. You were saying so much has changed in terms of leadership in the military. We are just living in a time of so much change. We're probably one of the generations that's going to see the most change in our lifetime, I think. When I was starting out in the workplace, email was just beginning, right? And the internet was barely starting.
Yeah.
And now we can't live without it. It's just incredible what's happened. So I think that rate is going to continue to accelerate, that rate of change, as we get a little bit older as well. That rate of change it's not slowing down, is what I'm saying. There's no way we're going back to where we were.
No, yeah, I agree. I remember, the dial-up internet days, and the first when those modems, screeching modems came out, and storage device was quite huge, and now you can get hundreds of times that amount of storage on a SD card the size of your fingernail. So I think things are only going to take off like that. I think we'll probably drift more towards some sort of augmentation with humans. There'll be some kind of chip or something that we can. Yeah. I think we might end up going down that road in the not too distant future. That could be interesting, particularly those people who've got ailments that might be helped with autonomous AI that might intervene and do things for them. I don't know.
Yeah, it is fascinating, the whole concept of AI and a topic for itself. But
sorry, that does open the topic though of leadership in AI, and I don't think we're as advanced as we should be.
No.
In leadership in AI and trying to catch up with ourselves. There's going back to the previous point, lots of organizations are still scrambling to build guardrails and policies around its use. So if you take cybersecurity, for example, that's really blown up, hasn't it, over recent years as a result of all that technology and having to protect it. I think AI might go the same way as that. That's going to blow up over the next few years around the management and security of it.
Yeah, and it from everything I'm seeing, talking to my clients and stuff like that, it's a big challenge about how to put it in and use it safely so it doesn't go rogue. I was sharing with you before we came on about having tried to create an AI bot to help me, AI helper, and it went rogue and started sending emails to every Tom, Dick and Harry in my database. There's a lot we've still got to learn about it and feel comfortable with it. And some companies clearly embracing it for only certain tasks and not others, because there is a degree of risk if it goes rogue like mine did. We'll probably say it's user error because I probably didn't set it up properly, and although I thought I'd been pretty good in its scripting about what it could and couldn't do, but when you start rolling out AI usage to our team members and without any rules and regulations about how they can and can't use it, it's always going to be challenging. And I think there's a lot leaders need to learn and embrace about how to deploy it effectively in the workplace.
Here's a thought that has just occurred to me. I've talked about the first part of this previously with friends and colleagues, that I come from an era of doing maths at school longhand.
Yeah, and me too.
I'm not as quick as I used to be because I don't use that part of my brain so often these days. But I have got a good ballpark idea of where a simple subtraction, multiplication should end up. I've got a reasonable idea that it should be 81, not 2005 or something. You kind of got that ballpark. And I've certainly seen my children grow up, both of them in their early 20s now, and no idea. They've just banged it into a calculator and gone there, and no, that can't be right, and then go back through. I wonder if we're going to get to that with AI. I wonder whether or not we took earlier, whether or not someone is going to just feed a load of prompts in, a load of context, a load of data. AI is going to spit a result out, and they're going to go brilliant and move on, and with no comprehension that it's off. There's something in there. There's something around preventing that, I think, that needs looking at.
No, I think definitely. And particularly, I was about to say for the younger generation, but that's not necessarily the case. But when I think a lot of the stuff I learned in the workplace was very informal, and it was like listening to other people's conversations and what happened. I always call it learning by osmosis, right? When they were the other conversations you heard around you, and that's how you learned about how things operated in the workplace or what was going on with clients and stuff like that. And now there's this danger with AI that you put it in and it comes out, and maybe you're not even sharing it with anyone else. So you've got no kind of frame of reference to even know whether that number should be 81 or 2005 in your example, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, my mind's going off now, but it's not a totally dissimilar scenario with young people now, our young colleagues coming into the workplace from university or maybe apprenticeship, slightly different, and going straight into hybrid working or remote working, and they haven't got the more experienced older colleagues around them to tell them that's not appropriate, or this is the better way of going about doing that, or just how to socialize better. I do wonder how, if someone's never had a job before and they go straight into a remote job, effectively they're dealing with a TV character on their screen 8 hours a day. That can't be good for human interaction, for learning those social skills that you only get when you're in face-to-face scenarios. And maybe that's something leadership needs to consider as well.
Yeah, and I think I'm more and more, part of my work is the leadership work with the horses, that experiential stuff. And I think more and more I'm finding companies are recognizing the need to get people together, because some of their colleagues are just people on screens that they've never ever met in the flesh before. So I think the importance of getting people together can never be underestimated. And we know it's the power of relationships that drive business, right?
Sure.
And so much easier to have that influence and impact on people when you've actually met them face to face and you've got that relationship with them, than if you don't know them at all and they're somebody on a screen. It's just more challenging. And if there's somebody you've never ever interacted before, even more difficult. But I've always found that I get the best success when I spend time investing in relationships with people in the workplace. And then usually when I need help with something, people show up because they've invested that time and energy with me. And this is an example of this in the next couple of weeks when I end up having to move house. The man who delivers my hay, I have a great relationship with him, and he's, oh yeah, I'll bring a horse box around and move your horses for you, Julia. I'm like,
nice.
What a result. But that's from the last 5 years of chatting to him every time he comes and building that rapport with him. And then it's so much easier. I didn't even have to ask him to help me out. He volunteered it. And I think that when we can get to that kind of point in the workplace, that really starts breaking down the silos that we see so often happening in the workplace and makes everyone a lot more productive for the betterment of the business.
I think it's community, and I worked for an organization years ago that towards the end of H1 or H2 they'd be looking at the numbers, and they would say, okay, you're not going on to customer site for this week or for the next 2 weeks, so I'd be in the office or at home. And I certainly couldn't get around all of my team members who are geographically spread around the UK. And I think those relationships suffered as a result of not being in front of them often enough. And performance reviews were awful things to go through because you haven't built up a rapport or maintained it. And I wonder sometimes whether these communities of practice now are trying to replace some of that to some extent. But but we all know what it's like. I think I do anyway. When the DPD or the delivery partners are available, DPD, Royal Mail, whoever it is that brings you internet shopping, if you stand on the doorstep chatting away to them for more than a couple of minutes, you're probably missing a bit of real human interaction, aren't you?
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. But to spend that time, because then they make sure they leave it when you're not there and somewhere that you're actually going to find it. So it really pays off over time.
Yeah, I was going to ask, actually, you mentioned the horse. I was out of pure curiosity, because I think there's parallels between my dogs and the horses in terms of rocking up. I see people now maybe a little bit anxious in the workplace because they're not interacting as freely as because they're not face to face as often. And I've talked to different people about being authentic, and some people believe they should be authentic. Still mind your P's and Q's, but you should bring yourself. And other people go, oh, no, I adopt a persona when I come to work. And I don't agree with that, although I've used that technique previously with my son. But I was going to ask, how do the horses deal with that? Do the horses help some people who may be anxious? Because how does that manifest itself?
So the horses are really good at what we call measuring sensory acuity. So they really read energy from a long way away. So they know that people are anxious. But the other thing that they do or the other thing, should I say, that they hate is if that person is anxious and they pretend they're not, they can't deal with that dissonance and it not being authentic.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
horses are looking for that authenticity. So the real true you underneath
Yeah.
it. And the horses will deal with people being anxious or scared, but just own it. And just owning it, going to yourself, I know I'm a bit scared and it's okay. It's when people try and put on that bravado and pretend everything's all right when they're quaking inside, that the horses find that really difficult to resonate with that, because vibrationally that's out of alignment and they don't like that. So congruence is a really big thing for them. And I think our team members know, I know there are a lot of topics, fake it till you make it and stuff like that, but your team members know. And I think as a leader right now, one of the big challenges is so much on your plate. And actually, there's a piece for me for leaders to be more vulnerable and actually show up and say, I'm not 100% sure what we're going to do in this situation, but this is what we're going to do as the next step right now. And then things may have to change because the environment changes and everything changes around us. And for me, that was a big lesson I learned when leading my team through that Enron crisis, because for a long time I tried to pretend to them everything would be all right, and there were real question marks about whether my division was going to be let go and we were all going to, or roles were all going to be made redundant. And I kept trying to make out it was all okay. And actually, because I didn't believe it, they didn't believe it.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know. So actually, things improved dramatically, even though it was challenging, when I turned around and said, really, I don't know what's going to happen right now, but these are what I think might happen. Now you've got some options. You can make some choices about what you want to do. Do you want to hang around and see where we're going to land? Do you want to jump ship? But I think people felt empowered and they felt trusted that I'd shared, even though I didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's so rare for a leader really right nowadays to be able to know. But of course, you can't as a leader go through life going, I don't know all the time. And that level of vulnerability would be perceived as you being incompetent. But I think you can at times share that we're navigating a new space, that we have some clarity about this is the next step that we're going to do. Where that ends up, I'm not quite sure right now, because I'm not sure how things are going to pan out. And I think people appreciate that level of clarity and certainty, even though it might be feeling certainty in an uncertain world, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you on that one. I've recently had to share future strategy or road with a team that some people knew but hadn't been cascaded through, and I then had to cascade that through. So for some of those it was like, oh, okay, but by saying I don't know what's going to happen here and here, here's what my ambitions are and this is what I'm going to work towards, but I really don't know what's going to happen. We'll find that out when we get there. But after that initial, oh, actually everyone is pulling together, and I think that people are thankful for the honesty.
Yeah, I definitely think so. Craig, I'm very conscious. God, we've been talking for 45 minutes.
There you go.
I know. This has been so interesting, and I love your thoughts on leadership. And it's always really nice to be speaking to somebody on the coalface who's actually leading and running teams each and every day about what some of the things they're experiencing. And we've covered a load of different topics, from AI to how to lead to how to be authentic. So thank you so much for your time today. We really
Thanks
appreciate
for having me.
it. No,
It's been great to be here. Thank you.
no, it's my absolute pleasure. And for everyone listening today, lots of gems of wisdom for you to take away. But I think the one I'd leave you is the one we've just spoken about at the end, with is how do you show up as a more authentic leader this week? How do you be congruent and do what you say you're going to do so that you can elicit trust in your team? So until next week, everyone, have an amazing time, and please do connect with us, and we'll have Craig's details in the show notes so that you can follow him and all his thinking about the everyday leader on LinkedIn, where he's regularly posting. So bye-bye, everyone. Have an amazing day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.